Hello class, it's me again, your Lady Alchemist, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For today's objective, number 1 is to define chemical equation, balance a chemical equation, and identify the parts and symbols used in a chemical equation. Now, when a little amount of sugar was heated, what do you notice? What do you think will happen to sugar? Do you think there were new substances formed? So we're going to find out. Okay, so since our topic for today is all about the chemical equation, so we're going to identify and recall some things to remember in writing a chemical equation. Number 1 is to elements or exist as diatomic molecules, or the elements that exist as diatomic molecules are written as follows. So we have F2, H2, N2, Cl2, Br2, and I2. So those are actually elements belong to the halogen group. And number 2 is the reactants or the starting materials are written on the left side of the equation, while the products, or also known as the new substances formed, are placed to the right side of the equation. And number 3, the sign arrow means yield and shows the direction of the reaction. A double arrow means the direction is reversible and can go on both directions. Now here are some of the symbols used for chemical equation. We always use G, small g for gas, S for solid, small l for liquid, AQ for substance in water solution or also known as aqueous solution, and a triangle to represent the heat. Okay, the law of conservation of mass states that the mass of the reactant is always equal to the mass of the product before and after the reaction. Now, how do you balance a chemical equation? When there is the same number of each type of atom in the reactant and in the product, you can say that the equation is balanced. The law of conservation of mass states that the mass of the reactant is always equal to the mass of the product before the chemical or before and after the chemical reaction. So as you can see in the given sample, you have your reactant and the product, and then you have your symbols. So number 1 is when solid carbon is burned with excess oxygen gas, the carbon dioxide gas is produced. So you have the symbol C for carbon, then you have the symbol S, small s, to represent the solid. So you read that as solid carbon is burned with excess oxygen gas and it will produce carbon dioxide gas. A change in color or a change in temperature can also indicate that there is a chemical change happen. Example, when you heat a small amount of mercury 2 oxide in a test tube, the amorphous orange compound turns brown, then black, and finally disappears. Moisture is also observed near the mouth of the test tube. The word equation is mercury 2 oxide. When heat was applied, it will produce mercury and oxygen gas. So as you can see in the equation, so you have your formula. The chemical formula of mercury 2 oxide is HGO. When heat was applied, it will decompose to hydrogen and oxygen gas. Now let's move on to the steps on how to balance the equation. First step or step number 1 is to count the number of atoms of each element in the reactant side and in the product side. Now you have to check the equation or the chemical equation. You have to identify the reactant and the product. Take note that the reactant is always written on your left side and the product side is always written on the right side. Number 2 is to find out which atoms are unbalanced. Number 3, now balance each at a time. use a number called coefficient to balance the equation. Now, what is a coefficient? A coefficient is a whole number written which placed before an element and a compound to balance the equation. It serves as the multiplier of the atoms in the formula. The subscript in the formula are never changed, since a change in the subscript would mean a change in the substance involved. And number 4, you have to check if the equation is completely balanced. Okay, so let's try to analyze the sample. You write the reaction between a sodium metal and chlorine gas to form solid sodium chloride. So your chemical equation, again, you have to write the reactant on the right side and the product on the left side. So if using this given, we're going to write the reactant as your reactant here is your aluminum and chlorine, and your product will be AlCl3 or aluminum chloride. Now recall the crisscross method in writing the correct product or the formula. So you have Al plus Cl2 will produce AlCl3. So when you combine Al and Cl using the crisscross method, you come up with the formula AlCl3. Now, how to balance the equation is to first check the number of atoms for each element in the reactant side and in the product side. So you have to check. So your reactant is aluminum, and then the same goes with your product. So check the number of atoms present for aluminum in the reactant side. So this is your reactant side, and this is your product side. Now check on the number of element present for the reactant side. So you have aluminum and chlorine. So in the reactant side, your aluminum is only 1. How about in the product side? So in the product side, aluminum is also 1. Next, how about chlorine in the reactant side? So you have Cl. So how many atoms are present for Cl in the reactant side? So you have 2. As you can see, you have 2 here. And how about in the product side? So you have 3. So definitely you can now check that the equation is not balanced. So the equation is not balanced. You have to find out which atom are unbalanced. So ano-ano ba yung mga hindi balanced? So you have aluminum and chlorine. Actually, dalawa yung hindi balanced. Now, balance each element at a time by putting a coefficient in front of a symbol for the formulas to balance the equation. Okay, so here is your sample. So you're going to put coefficient 2. So remember that you're going to put coefficient before an element or a compound. So saan mo lang pwedeng ilagay yung coefficient? So umpisa lang ng element. So this is an element again. And pwede mo rin siyang ilagay sa umpisa ng compound or before a compound. Now take note that yung subscript ay hindi mo pwedeng palitan. Okay, so let's now check. So you have 1 atom. Originally, you have 1 atom of aluminum. So automatic po yan. So you have 1 in here. And then 2 for chlorine. You have 2 for the reactant side. How about for the product side? So you have 1 for aluminum for the product side, and you have 3 for chlorine. Now, how do you balance the equation? Again, you have to put coefficient to balance the equation. So, since it is a compound, kapag naglagay ka ng coefficient dito sa unahan ng compound, damay po yung dalawang element. So, what you're going to do is to multiply. So, as you can see in your arrow, So 2 times 1 atom from aluminum will become 2. And 2 times 3 from Cl is 6. How about in the reactant side? So you have 2 for originally, you have 2 for Cl, and then you put a coefficient 3 just to balance the chlorine in the product and in the reactant side. So 3 times 2 is 6. So check. The equation now is balanced for Cl. Now how about aluminum? And you put 2 here times 1 and it's now balanced. So we're going to check if the equation is balanced. So you can add 2 plus 6 is 8, and then 2 plus 6 is 8 for the reactant side and another 8 for the product side. So the reactant and the product are now balanced. Now what are the types of chemical equation? The first type of chemical equation is combination equation, decomposition reaction or breaking apart reaction. That's number 2. Number 3 is single replacement reaction, and number 4 is the double displacement reaction. Okay, so let's try this. So take note that this is your reactant side and your product side. Now, in order for you to identify the product, so you can use the rule in writing correct chemical formula by the use of crisscross method. So again, recall, aluminum belongs to family 3. So this is positive 3 and oxygen is negative 2. So cross their oxidation number, have 2 and 3. So you have your correct formula, which is Al2O3. Now question, when you're going to write O in a separate way, oxygen will always it is a diatomic molecule, so you put 2 to represent that oxygen is a under diatomic molecule. So let's check if the number of atoms present for the reactant side. So what are the elements present for the reactant side? So you have Al and O. So the same goes with the product. So kung ano yung element na nilagay nyo sa reactant, yun din dapat sa product para hindi kayo malito. Okay? So let's check on the number of atoms present for each element. So for the aluminum in the reactant side, you have 1. Automatic yan na meron yung 1. And then you have 2. How about in the product side? You have 2. And you have 3 for oxygen. Okay. Now, how are you going to balance the equation? Again, you're going to use the coefficient. So a coefficient is a number written before an element or a compound that is used to balance the equation. So, oxygen is not balanced as well as the aluminum. So, what possible or what coefficient or the lowest coefficient that do you think can balance the equation? So, the lowest possible coefficient that can balance the equation is 2. We're going to put 2 here. And then distribute since it is a compound. So 2 times 2 is equal to 4. How about oxygen? So distribute. So you have 3 times 2 equals 6. Now, let's check on the reactant side. So what number or what coefficient you're going to use to balance the oxygen? So you have 2 here. So the possible lowest coefficient is 3. So you cannot put 2 here kasi kapag 2 ang nilagay mo dyan, 2 times 2 is 4. So kulang. So the lowest possible is 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. So balance po tayo sa oxygen. Okay. How about aluminum? So what number or what coefficient we're going to use to balance aluminum. So you put 4, the lowest possible. Cannot put 2. Why? It is because that when you multiply 1 times 2 is the same. 2 lang din yun. So aluminum in the reactant, in the product side rather, is 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. So let's check on the total. We have 4 and 6, 4 and 6 for a total of 10. And that's it. The equation is now balanced. Okay, another equation. Going to balance the equation using the sample. Okay, so let's identify the reactant and the product. Take note that you have to first write the element on the reactant side. So in step by step, you have chlorine and lithium. So ganun din sa kabila. So you have Li and Cl. Then identify the number of atoms present for each element. So you have 1 for Li and then 2 for Cl. How about in the product side? So you have 1 and 1. So remember that you come up with this formula by using the crisscross method. So we have Li and Cl. That's why I asked you last time to be more familiar with writing correct chemical formula kasi gagamitin nyo talaga siya. So this is positive 1 and negative 1. So it is equal to 0. So wala tayong subscript. Automatic na meron niyang 1. So we're going to balance the equations and may problema sa chlorine tayo, may problema on the reactant side. So the lowest possible coefficient that we're going to put in the product side is 2. So distribute natin. Ang Cl ay magiging 2. So it is automatic balance to Cl. Okay, so balance to, and then this one. Now, how about Li? So, since it is a compound and it is lithium chloride, so the coefficient 2 will distribute to Li. Okay? So, 2, you have 1 here times 2 using your coefficient, and your final answer is 2. How about in the reactant side? So, you put 2 to balance Li. Okay, so 1 times 2 is equal to 2. So let's check. 2 plus 2 is, we have 2 for Li, a total of 4. About in the reactant side is also 4. So the equation is now balanced. Now it's your turn to balance the equation. I'm giving you 3 minutes to balance this given equation. So you have K plus F2 will produce KF. So remember to put a coefficient to balance the equation. So you can now start. How about this one? So again, identify your reactant and your product. So we have how many elements present for the reactant side. So we have Ba or barium. We have O and another O, oxygen. Then you have H. So that you are going to rewrite in order. So we have Ba, barium, oxygen, and hydrogen. Okay, so let's check the number of atoms present for each element. Okay, So we have Ba is 1, and then hydrogen is 2. How about oxygen? So you have 1 here and another 1 here. So 1, then you have the plus sign. So we're going to add 1 and another 1. So you have 2. Next, in the product side, so you have 1 for barium. How about the oxygen? So you have 2 here, and then the 2 here, or the subscript 2 here, will distribute on your polyatomic ion. So ilan na ngayon ang oxygen? 2 na. How about the hydrogen? So 2 din. So let's check. Do we need to balance the equation? No. Why? It is because the equation is already balanced. So you can check. So the reason why you have to check each element, just to make sure that if the equation is balanced or not. So you're going to add 1 plus 2 plus 2 is 5. And for the product side is also 5. So there's no need for you to balance the equation because the equation is already balanced. Did you get it? I hope so. And that ends my lesson for today. I hope you learned something new. So thank you for listening. So I hope to see you on my next video. Bye! Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.